This is normally the part where I introduce my guest, but I don't have one today. So I will introduce myself. I usually don't do that. I'm Ryan Hadley. Thank you for tuning in to Fitness and Consciousness. I'm going to be talking about several things today. I believe they're all related. Maybe some things that are just interesting to think about. Um, this episode is called King of Her Jungle. And I'm going to touch on why that is, probably. And I'm also going to talk about speech, the ability to express ourselves. Bruce Lee, in one of the famous quotes that is shared commonly today, is he says something like, I'm able to do all of these fancy movements, and I can do all these tricks, and I can do these things, and it can feed his ego. But to truly express yourself, it is very hard to do. Think about that. This is Bruce Lee saying the ability to express ourselves honestly is very hard to do. I'll leave that there. I'm going to move on a little bit. I'm going to tell a couple stories, and I'm going to address the first negative YouTube comment. Got my first thumbs down on a video, and he left a comment. I responded to that comment. I'm going to talk about why he was incorrect and also where he was correct. And I'm going to just kind of feel that out. There's a quote that I just heard a little bit ago. I was listening to Jordan Peterson and getting ready to do this episode, and he said people think by talking. So he is a psychologist, and he says that one of the best things that you can do as a psychologist, he's given advice to someone who's going through school for that. He says, don't underestimate the value of just listening, because people think by talking. And so if someone has a problem and you give them the answer and then it works, well, it's more your victory than theirs. But if they can talk things out and you're there as a sounding board and you are there to give advice, if people can come to their own conclusions, then it's their victory. It's their gain. So people think by talking. And one of the things that the guy with the negative comment on YouTube, he was saying that this guy, he's like, what an idiot. He's like, he doesn't even understand anti-shrug. And we were talking about deadlifts with Dr. Stuart McGill, and he misinterpreted. I asked him what he meant. He's like, learn the basics, man. I said, okay, what basics are you talking about? And he said, 10 minutes and 34 seconds, I think it was, McGill is talking about alternate grip deadlifts with a straight bar and how that loads the back differently than double overhand grip. And this listener assumed that I didn't know he was talking about anti-shrug. He's like, you can't even grasp the concept or explain it. And that wasn't even what was happening. You can certainly anti-shrug with the alternate grip. And I'm not trying to get into the details of the deadlift, more of like this guy misunderstood speech. And that's, whose fault is that? And it could be mine or his or Dr. McGill's. But to me, I was right with McGill, and I believe McGill understood what I was saying. But this guy, he didn't know. And, he said, you're very underprepared, and you should have read Back Mechanic, and you should have read Ultimate Back Fitness and Performance. My response was, I have read those. I have Ultimate Back. I've read it a few times, refer to it somewhat regularly. And I posted a picture of myself on Instagram of me when I was about 9 years old doing a floor press with a stick with my mom's dumbbells tied to it with her ankle weights. And so I was pressing this weight. I was probably 8, 9 years old, something like that. And you can see in that picture that at 9 years old, I knew what anti-shrug is. I was 9 years old. So, anyways, this guy was also talking about speech, and like I can't put a sentence together. Sometimes I do stumble over my words. These episodes are not edited. There's usually no there's some questions I have planned out, but it's more like I have subjects to discuss with guests. And there are a few guests out of the more than 60, only a few that wanted their questions beforehand. Almost everyone else says they'll just go with the flow, ask whatever I want, and we let it rip. So I have a plan of several different topics, and then I don't know what the guest is going to say, so I don't have some planned response. And like I quoted Jordan Peterson at the beginning, people think by talking, and I'm trying to push my thinking. I'm trying to express myself better, more clearly, and I'm just like now, maybe like searching for the right words. And so do we even have words to explain everything that we think? In Spanish, there's more than one word for love. We only have one word for love in English. So what's missing there? And there's many words in Sanskrit that don't have an English translation. So what are we missing there? So like Bruce Lee said, to honestly express ourselves is very, very difficult. And so I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to read this poem that my dad used to read to me. My dad died in September 24th of 2005. My dad was born October 30th of 1950. So when I was a kid, he used to read this poem to me, and it's going to relate to the other things that I'm getting into. So it's several subjects today that are kind of scattered around, but they do have a common theme. And again, the name of the show is King of Her Jungle. And why is that? So we'll let that unfold as we go. So this poem my dad used to read to me. The Pirate Dawn Dirk of Dowdy by Mildred Plew Meggs. So written by a woman. Is that important? Ho, for the pirate Dawn Dirk of Dowdy. He was wicked as wicked could be, but oh, he was perfectly gorgeous to see, the pirate Dawn Dirk of Dowdy. His conscience, of course, was as black as a bat, but he had a floppity plume on his hat, and when he went walking it jiggled like that, the plume of the pirate Dowdy. His coat, it was handsome and cut with a slash, and often as ever he twirled his mustache. Deep down in the ocean the mermaids went splash, because of Dawn Dirk of Dowdy. Moreover, Dowdy had a purple tattoo, and stuck in his belt where he buckled it through were a dagger, a dirk, and a squizamaroo, for fierce was the pirate Dowdy. So fearful he was, he would shoot at a puff, and always at sea when the weather grew rough, he drank from a bottle and wrote on his cuff, did pirate Dawn Dirk of Dowdy. Oh, he had a cutlass that swung at his thigh, and he had a parrot called Pepperkin Pie, and a zigzaggy scar at the end of his eye had pirate Dawn Dirk of Dowdy. He kept in a cavern, this buccaneer bold, a curious chest that was covered with mold, and all of his pockets were jingly with gold. Oh, jing went the gold of Dowdy. His conscience, of course, it was crooked like a squash, but both of his boots made a slickerly slosh, and he went through the world with a wonderful swash. did pirate Don Dirk of Dowdy. It's true, he was wicked as wicked could be. His sins they outnumbered 103. But oh, he was perfectly gorgeous to see, the pirate Don Dirk of Dowdy. What does that have to do with anything? When I was listening to a book on CD by Pema Chodron, and she says that our ego is our fixed view of ourself. So we have, okay, so I can say, okay, I'm a nice guy. I'm honest. I don't cheat. I've never cheated on a girlfriend. I've never cheated anyone in a game. I've never done anything like any kind of like felonies. I've never done this, and I'm honest, and so on and so on. And I am these things. And so if I have someone that would say, well, here's a part where you were not honest, or maybe you didn't mention this, you didn't exactly lie, but you didn't have the whole truth, you didn't express the whole truth, you were lying by omission or something like that. Oh, that's going to cause a problem, because that's not me, because I'm honest, and I don't cheat, and I'm this and I'm that. And so my ego wants to fight that. And if we can have someone that holds a mirror to us, if they can do it kindly. I have a friend who we were discussing this, because I was, it's not like I did anything like really, really bad or anything, but she had thought that, I had this, part of my characteristic that maybe I didn't like, or it was her interpretation of events that was not like my own. And it wasn't a huge deal. But it was just like, how can you think that I did that? Because I'm this and I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. This is me in this fixed view of myself. And you're telling me something that doesn't fit. So that's a problem. I think I'm pretty good for the most part, this other fixed view of myself, of taking this information and trying to take an honest look at it, like the guy who with the negative comment on YouTube. So there was some truth to what he said. I was stumbling over my words a little bit, so he thought that this was like McGill was too like good to come on my show or something like that. But he was also wrong, because he thought I was talking about or trying to grasp the concept of anti-shrug, when I can prove a picture from 30 years ago when I was just a little kid. I understood it back then. But his part of the speech, it does make me think, how can I do better? And I actually have checked out some books from the library. I checked out some speeches, one from Martin Luther King. It's a compilation of his speeches, and some other books on his speech, communication, and trying to get better at that. But even a great speaker like Martin Luther King, I mean, who's more powerful than that guy? But did everybody take him the same way, just exactly how he meant? I would say there's no way that everyone could understand him just how they meant. That his messages resonated with a lot of people, and other people they're not a big fan. So why is that? Why can't we just understand each other? And look at the story of the Tower of Babel. We're all given these different languages to confuse us. Why is that? And so you have the pirate Don Dirk of Dowdy, and he's dressed up fancy, and he's this tough guy, but he makes the mermaids go splash. what is it about him that makes the mermaids go splash? So why isn't aren't the mermaids going splash with the nice guy that's more of the straight laced, but Don Dirk is the bad boy type, and he has this charisma, and maybe there's something in us that we're supposed to hold the mirror up for someone else. I think we have to do it kindly, but there's part of us that wants to help other people, that truly want to help other people. And some people are maybe more kind about it than others. This comes out in various ways. So I'm a teacher. I like teaching. I like to show people their strength. That's, if I can put it in just a short phrase, that's it. I want to show people their strength. And part of that is like looking at themselves. What can they do differently? And I try not to do it in a judgmental way. And if I'm in a relationship, I'm not trying to cause any kind of problems with saying this fixed view of myself. I wouldn't do that in a relationship, not me. But some of the feedback that I've gotten was, I think that I know more about spirituality than these different partners that I've had. I've had more than one person say that, and so part of me is like, well, I've been studying this stuff since I was a little kid. I got my first 2 yoga books when I was 15. I've been studying it since then. I have tons of yoga books out. I've done a lot of meditation. I've studied a lot of different cultural spirituality and looked into myself, did a lot. So I do feel like I know a lot about it, knowing about myself. I also can see other people. So if I started studying yoga in 1994, the real yoga, and someone else just did their 200-hour teacher training, how impressed am I going to be with what they're doing? That's a tough one. Maybe they can still say something that I find interesting, and the movement part of yoga to me is like is the least interesting. It's very, very interesting, but what if you can't move? Then what's going on in the mind. That's the important part. I wanted to share a story. I teach at a wilderness survival school. It's called White Pine Wilderness Academy. It's in Rocky Ripple, which is a little part of Indianapolis. And I teach strength and conditioning classes there, and kids and adults. And sometimes there would be Boy Scout troops that come in, and they do they just like take some of the classes that we have. It's just kind of like an evening for them. They come in for a couple hours and usually get divided up into like 3 groups. There might be like 30 or 40 of them, and maybe their brothers and sisters and their mom and their dad come, and they do various things. So maybe like one instructor is doing fire by friction, another one is doing whatever. And what I was doing was, I've done a couple of these, and the last one, I had the kids start off. So I had maybe 10, 12 kids at a time, somewhere around in there. And there may be, the sister and the mom and the dad around. And so I had the kids, each one by one, teach an animal movement. So I wasn't I learned the first time, they're not ready for some technical explanation of fitness stuff. That's not why they're there. It's just, rambunctious group of boys and girls, and they're not there to stand there, pay attention, and learn technical kettlebell techniques. So I had them one by one, like, okay, what's your favorite animal? cool, how does that animal move? And then they're teaching everyone by, demonstrating how this animal moves. So monkeys and bears and lions and tigers and wolves and whatever they come up with was cool with me. And they would move like that for, about a minute, 45 seconds, a minute, something like that. And then it's the next kid's turn to pick one. And at the end of it, or the second part of the class rather, we're playing this wrestling game. The game is you are in a push-up position and your opponent is like head to head with you. So you're each in the push-up position, and the idea is to pull your opponent off balance. So you're grabbing at the wrist and you're pulling them, and if they touch their knee or their elbow or anything touches the ground except their hands and feet, they lose. And so, they get going on that, and they're all having fun. The parents are getting involved. The moms and dads are going against their kids, and it was cool. That everybody that was really getting into it. It was fun. And at the end, I said, "Okay, who's the strongest? Who's the best wrestler?" And the biggest boy raised his hand. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw this girl raise her hand. This boy was maybe 12 years old, something like that, maybe 150 pounds. She was maybe 10, 11 years old, something like that, and maybe 75 pounds. So she was probably about half of his size, half his weight. Maybe he was more than twice as weighed twice as much as her, maybe more. I'm like, okay, let's see it. And so the crowd parts and they get in the middle and they go after it. You think one is going to win. Of course, this boy out is twice her size. So he would be the betting favorite, I would think, right? But she put up one fantastic fight. It was back and forth and back and forth, and the crowd was going crazy. They were cheering them on, and it looked like something from like Thailand or something. It's crazy. It's pandemonium. Crowd was going wild, back and forth, and it went on and on and on. Just when you think somebody's about to lose, they regain their posture and they're back at it. And then you see her reach out and grab his wrist and give him a pull, and down he went. She beat him. And the crowd went even more wild. And I was like, oh, that was awesome. Good job. And, people were just like clapping for, and I had no idea what was going to happen when I asked who was the strongest. I thought, well, maybe I'll go against them or something like that. I wasn't expecting the young girl, half the size of the biggest boy, to battle it out. I had no idea that was going to happen. And at the end of it, I looked at his expression, and he was kind of like smiling, like, yeah, I can't even be mad about that. That was fair and square. It was a good battle, and she beat him. And I was telling the story at class because they had the Boy Scouts in again. I didn't get to work with them because I was teaching another class at the time. I told the story about her, and I think, imagine what that does for her, and imagine what that does for him. So was that the best way for that situation to play out? Like, would it have been a big surprise? Would it have been something I even remembered if he beat her? So she would be able to hopefully like gain confidence from that. And he would hopefully be able to gain some humility in the good way. And when they did come Monday evening, they asked if they were going to be wrestling. They asked if they were going to be doing my class. I thought that was really neat because I'm not the wilderness survival expert. It's a wilderness survival school. They're Boy Scouts going to learn those kinds of skills. But, fitness and wrestling and these movements are skills. They would help you survive. And the kind of mentality that I think that I hope that she gained from it, or that they both gained, was that when I ask who's the strongest, and the biggest boy raises his hand, and after that, a girl half of his size raises her hand. I mean, just imagine that scene. Just think about what that looks like. Somebody twice as big as you says they're the strongest, and you raise your hand saying, actually, I'm the strongest. It was really powerful. It's something that I hope I hope I remember forever. And it's not really, that story is not exaggerated. It was a fair and square win. And I'm glad it went that way. Something else I was wanting to get into was just briefly how you can support the show if you want. There are two different ways, or like three different ways, I guess. One is on Patreon. I'm going to be catching up my Patreon account. So if you've checked out my Patreon, you see that I haven't updated that one for a while. It has the old shows on it. But you can support the show for as little as $1 per month on Patreon. So you just go to Patreon and look up Fitness and Consciousness, and you can be a patron to the show. $1 per month, it means a lot. Even just that much. The gesture of it, I appreciate. And you can do more than that if you want, but the other way is through Podbean, and that's Podbean. So just go on there, look up the show Fitness and Consciousness. Maybe you're listening to that now. And same thing, for as little as $1 a month, you can help. There are costs with the show. It doesn't really cost me a lot, and but there are monthly fees, and I do plan, making a business out of this. I've spent a good amount of time, researching guests, looking for great guests. My guest list is amazing. I started this in February. This is episode 66, and it's only the second, this is the third one I've done by myself. And when I first started, I was thinking, well, if I can get a guest, I'll have the guest. If I can't, I'll just do the episode by myself. And little did I know that oftentimes I would have 2 or 3 guests in one weekend, and people are excited to do it. They're making connections. People are contacting them after they do their show. And that's kind of my whole idea, is to connect people with what they want, get these stories out. There's so many great things in this world. And if you would, maybe if you would know me outside of like what I'm doing here, or maybe to the guy that left the negative comment on YouTube, you might be surprised that I'm making a business out of talking to people. And to me, it's not a business first; it's a passion first. But I'm not going to make any statements about not wanting to make money from it. I definitely do, but it's not first. And I rarely even mention how to support the show. But you can go to Patreon or Podbean. And if you prefer PayPal, you can do Ryan at hadleyfitness.com. It's Ryan, RYAN, at Hadley, HADLEY, fitness.com. It's and you can, as much or little as you want. I do support another show. I support Jordan Peterson's show just for $1 a month. He's not hurting for that $1 per month, but I want to. It's the gesture of it. And so if he saves up for 3 months and gets himself a cup of coffee on me, then I'm happy about that. Let's see. What else did I want to talk about today? So the name of this show, the name of this episode, King of Her Jungle. There's maybe a inside joke to that I'm not going to talk about, but the idea of that, and starting off with the pirate Don Dirk of Dowdee, and the mirror, like, what do we want out of our relationships? So to me, the most important things in our lives are our relationships. And, it starts off with our parents and our, brothers, sisters. And then the most important relationships, I think, or the most transformative, are the ones that you have with your boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband. And it's interesting to me, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is how the vast majority of relationships don't work. So in America, we have, I think it's more than half of marriages end in divorce. So think, okay, you get married when you're 25 or 30 or whatever. Well, when you were in high school, the high school sweetheart, why didn't that work out? Some people marry their high school sweetheart, but generally those kind of come and go. Maybe there's, 1 or 2 girlfriends per year. Maybe there's more than that. So maybe in high school there's 5, or who knows? Everybody's numbers are so different, but none of those worked out either. So you got divorced. The ones in high school didn't work out. Then you look at junior high. Well, those didn't work out either. You wrote that boy's name on your notebook 1,000 times a day, just so crazy about this guy. You're going to be together forever. 7th grade, you've got it figured out. This dude is so cool. But it doesn't. Then you look back at grade school and, the same thing. Like, why aren't these relationships working? And a lot of it is communication, which is the message of the show. Like, how well can we truly communicate? And, we don't have every word in English. Yoga is very popular. What's the English translation of yoga? Yoga is a Sanskrit word. What's the English translation? There isn't one. So we'll just use yoga. Okay, well, in yoga, they talk about the prana. What's the definition of that? Energy? Well, kind of. Breath? Well, yeah, but, and it goes on and on. And so can we truly express ourselves? And it's been my experience where it seems like if I'm talking to a partner, or those are the main examples for now, or even the guy that left the negative YouTube comment, it's, you're trying to communicate something and you think, like, man, if this person could just understand what I'm saying, we would be fine. We wouldn't even be arguing. But it seems like there's just this fundamental misunderstanding. And why is that? Are we supposed to just gain the skill of like listening and forgiveness, giving someone the benefit of the doubt? And I think if someone does something like if they, if they cheat or something like that, or they're outright lying, then maybe you don't have to forgive that. You don't have to like, oh, they, cheated for some really great reason, and that's okay. I don't think that at all. But if you have someone and you can just trust them to be good and they're trying, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt, and instead of giving them a hard time about something, maybe just let it go. So I think a lot of problems that we have with someone else can just be fixed in our own mind. And for instance, I needed a ride to go get my car. I have two cars, and one of them was at the shop, and I was wanting to take this friend of mine out for dinner, and I said, "Well, I need a ride to go get my car. We can go out to eat by where it is, and then you can just drop me off at my car when we're done." And then she didn't want to do that. She was tired. She'd been driving a lot. I didn't make a big deal out of it. It wasn't a big deal. And so I was like, okay, no problem. I'll get an Uber. Then I'll go get some carry out and bring it to your apartment. And it was really no big deal, but there was a part of me that was like, well, it wouldn't be that big of a deal if you just gave me a ride, would it? But I didn't even say that because it really wasn't that big of a deal to me. And so what ended up happening was I get the Uber, and this guy, I don't even remember what brought it up. Oh, he said, I asked him how he liked driving the Uber. He said that he really wanted to be driving a semi. And he said, but I said, oh, why aren't you? And he said, well, I got in a really bad car accident. I think he was driving the semi. He got in a really bad accident, and he messed his back up really bad. And he said he had deteriorating discs. And he was driving with bad posture, kind of the leaned back sort of, a lot of spine flexion, kind of that sort of one hand on the wheel, so you're not lined up very well. And he's telling me about his back. And I said, well, I know a book for you. And I said, it was the book Back Mechanic. Happens to be the same book that my negative commenter suggested I read. I did read it. If you give me a test on it, I'd get an A. Same thing with Ultimate Back. Give me a test on it, I'd get an A on that book for sure, on the test. Anyways, he's like, oh, okay. And I was kind of wondering how well he was going to receive the information. And he was super cool and very appreciative of it. He was like, I'm going to go. He's like, Back Mechanic. I'm going to go to the library and get that in the morning. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. There's also this other book, Ultimate Back Fitness and Performance. And I was like, but first start with Ultimate Back. It can help you, or Back Mechanic, start with that one. It can help you fix your back yourself, because they're wanting to do surgery, and he was afraid to get the surgery. And I was like, well, there's people that thought they should have had surgery, and they follow McGill's method, and they don't have to get surgery. And so he was really happy, really appreciative of that information. And so when I was leaving his car, I was like, okay, if you forget the name of the book or anything, do you have my number? He's like, oh, I'll have your Uber number. So I gave him my phone number, and I was like, just send me a message, no problem, and I'll let you know, what I recommend. And so if my friend would have came and picked me up, that wouldn't have happened. And I do believe he will look at that book. And he was like, oh, man, I'm so glad I picked you up. And he was going home right after his ride with me. He picked me up in like 1 minute. So why did I end up in the car with him? What was it? Um, some like part of a divine plan? Like, why would he happen to pick up a guy? He's been picking people up for months and months and months and never got this information. I ask a friend for a ride. She can't do it. She's tired. No problem. I'll get an Uber. And this guy needed information that I had and very much appreciated it. And I just wonder if that was on purpose. So, like, what if I would have gotten mad at my friend? Like, oh, you can't even give me a ride. And, what if I would have handled that out loud to her instead of just handle it in my mind, which really on a scale of 10, it was not even a 1. I didn't mind getting an Uber. It was for her birthday. And so I wasn't trying to put her out of her way on her birthday. But if I would have taken a different approach and gotten mad at her about it and then had the ride with this guy, and then maybe I would have been in a bad mood or something, and maybe I wouldn't have asked him, what he thought about driving Uber, and maybe he wouldn't have told me about his back, and then he wouldn't have learned about Stuart McGill and this possible path for healing himself. And I used to drive a cab. I drove a cab for about 7 years. And what had happened was I had another job, and I got laid off. And I wanted something where I wasn't going to get laid off anymore. So I became an independent cab driver, driving for Yellow Cab. And I did a lot of medical transportation. I would pick up people, take them to their cancer treatments, uh, all kinds of medical appointments and surgeries, and sometimes to the emergency room. And I was kind of wonder, like, why am I picking these people up? Because like sometimes it just seems like I was really meant to meet these individuals. I would say most of them I don't remember, but there are some that I'll never forget. And I met one, and I've told the story on the show several times, I think. But I met one, and I think she was maybe an angel or a bodhisattva or something like that. And what happened was, I was at the time I was reading a lot about qigong, practicing qigong, yoga, and doing all kinds of like fitness and meditation, and I kept reading that if you really want to get to the highest level, you can't drink, you can't smoke weed, you can't do any kind of intoxicant. You have to be perfectly clean. You have to do that to get to the highest level. You can get to a high level and still smoke and drink, and you can get results, but you can't get the best results. And but I would still like drink. I would have like a sorry, usually just a beer or two, but almost every day. Come home from work, have a beer. Sometimes I would have more than that, or get some whiskey or something like that. But so I didn't have like a real problem. I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic, or I wasn't at rock bottom, or uh, I don't think it was really having a huge negative impact on my life in that way. But it wasn't doing me any favors either. I like the craft beers, like oatmeal stouts were my favorite, and they're $10-12 for a 6-pack, and so that added up over time. And um, smoking weed, and the money from that adds up over time. And I think, like, man, if I had all the money that I've ever spent on weed, do you know how much weed I could buy? No, that was actually someone else's joke. But imagine all the money that you've spent on stuff that doesn't really help you, stuff that is bad for you. People spend enormous amounts of money on things that are bad for their health. Maybe I'll get into that in another episode. I'm going to start to wrap this up here. I think, the effort people put into doing things, against themselves. But anyways, I was picking up this woman who I think was an angel or a bodhisattva. And the first time I picked her up, she sat in the back seat, and I took her to work. I was like, man, she seemed really amazing. And I don't think we talked very much, but she left an impression, and she had called into the yellow cab phone number. And then I just happened to be the one that picked her up. And then a couple weeks later, she calls my phone, my cell phone, my personal cell phone, and asked me for the ride. And I said, sure. And so then she starts sitting in the front. And it was like right away we were talking about spiritual things. And like I said, I think she was an angel or bodhisattva. But her earth story, as I call it, was she was from India, and she was in an arranged marriage. She even called herself a housewife, even though she had a full-time job. There's a lot of different things, and she wasn't allowed to leave her house without her husband, and just a lot of stuff that doesn't really fly over here. But that was her her earth story, as I call it. And I knew that she didn't drink. I knew that she was, didn't smoke or anything like that. We were just immediately start talking about spiritual things, and sometimes I'd be dropping her off, and she would just sit in the car, and we'd talk for 10, 20 minutes, and I was reading at the time, you gotta quit drinking, you gotta do these things or stop doing these things. And on July 3rd of 6 years ago, I was dropping her off at her apartment, and it was like I saw my potential. And it wasn't like that it was really her, but maybe someone like her. That doesn't really sound right, someone like her, but you know what I mean. Someone at that level, someone that could help me make myself better. And so I went home, and I had my last beer. I didn't even drink all of it. Had like my last little bit of smoke and went to sleep. And I woke up, and my internal energy started going really wild. And I don't know if Kundalini or some kind of energetic awakening. It was very powerful. It was normally very quiet and calm, and I became very, very chatty. Somebody would get in the cab, and it was just like blah 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 blah, just talking really fast and super hyper. And I couldn't sleep, and I didn't eat anything for 5 days. I think on the 6th day, I had like 4 pieces of popcorn at the movie theater with my son. And then the next day I started eating again, and my energy started to get more grounded again. But that was the last time I ever saw her. I never heard from her again. I went from picking her up every day, twice a day, Monday through Friday, for maybe at least a couple months, 3 months maybe. It's hard to remember exactly, but 2, 3 months. And then never saw her again, never heard from her again. I've tried looking her up on Facebook and different ways, and there's just no trace. So I wonder, you know, what were the odds of me picking her up to begin with? And I give her like the credit for this little change. It was like she just changed the dial a little bit. Like, oh, this guy drinks, turn the dial a bit. Now he doesn't. And I didn't have any kind of cravings for it. It was just done. And the habit was just over. And it seemed like it was really meant to be. So like, was it, some divine plan? And I don't know if we have, a divine plan or not. I think if we live like we do, then we can't really go wrong with that. Uh, you're supposed to be here now. You're supposed to meet that person. Maybe it was a good experience. Maybe it was a bad experience. What did you learn from it? What are you going to do about it? And I'm going to share, I think, one more story, and then I'm going to close up here. So I was talking about Qigong, and it was mostly like Qigong books and yoga books that I was reading that said you had to quit drinking to reach the highest level. When I started out as a personal trainer in 1999, and I started to work at, I left one job for another. I was an employee at the time, employee trainer. And I started working at this place. It was the most successful personal training studio in Indianapolis at the time. And the owner, I believe he has died now. So, no like big disrespect or anything, but he wanted to control everything there, even my own workouts. He wanted to tell me what my workout was. And when I first started there, he was, doing the interview and everything. He's like, "What are your goals? Bigger, faster, stronger?" And it's like, well, I weighed like 176 at the time. I was tested at, he tested me at 4% body fat. And I said, well, I don't really care about getting bigger, but yeah, faster, stronger. And I said something like, but if I happen to gain 10 pounds, I wouldn't be, upset about it. But he took that 10 pounds and just like held on to it. And I was, at the time I was also working at UPS, and I was working like around the clock. So I'd work at UPS. I think I'd start at like 10 at night, work until 3 in the morning. I'd have to be at the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, maybe work until noon, come back in the afternoon, work until the evening, go back to UPS and work all. So I was sleeping in like these, my schedule was crazy. I was working like 70 some hours a week. And I started there at 176. And then when I had my review for my raise and everything, I weighed like 155. So I lost 20 pounds working there. I was still just as strong. I was still just shredded, just cut and healthy. I didn't feel worn down or anything from the hours. But there was like the co-owner, and he was like doing the review, and he's like looking at me. He was just like, he's like, of course there's no raise. He's like, you're just thin. And he's looking at me like I'm disgusting. And I'm thinking, I could beat you up real easy. I know that you're bigger than me, but I didn't say anything like that. I was like, man, I've been doing martial arts for a long time. It was like I could throw you on your head and choke you out. And you're looking at me like I'm some puny sickling. And so they would, yeah. Anyways, what happened was I started looking for another job. They put me on a couple suspensions and stuff. They said I didn't shave close enough. And the owner would like get right up in my face and look, see if he could see any like whiskers poking out. He had to be clean shaven. And he would, so he put me on a suspension. So I was supposed to like come back in a week. And he said something like, if you try to get another job, it's not going to happen. He said that the business community in Indianapolis is very small, and we can keep you from getting another job. And so I got another job. I started selling lawn care, and I turned in my T-shirts at the gym. I was like, yeah, I got another full-time job. I'm quitting, and when I walked in, I remember he's like, we can do this the hard way, or we can do this the easy way. I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I was like, I'm just turning my shirts in. I'm done with this stuff. He even like wanted me to eat, like when I weighed in at 155 at my review, he told me I have to eat a banana every day when I get there. I didn't eat another banana after he told me that for years. I was like, I'm not eating a banana. No. I like bananas, but if you tell me I have to eat a banana every day, no. The answer is no. Anyways, so I started selling lawn care, and I was really interested in Qigong. And at the evening, before we would go out and do the estimates, we would get the estimates of people that wanted their lawns looked at, and tell like what's going on in the lawn. You have these weeds, and here's what we can do, and that kind of stuff. And so they're passed out. Maybe there was 5 salesmen there at the time or something like that. And so I get my stack, and I'm looking through them the night before, and I see this one, and it said Yang Shao, and it like shocked me. I was like, whoa, I'm going to ask him if he teaches Qigong. It didn't say anything about it. It just said his name and address. And it wasn't just because he is Chinese. I've done estimates for 100 Chinese people, never had that thought, never had that feeling, never had that experience. But this estimate just like shocked me. It sent me a jolt, and I was like, oh, whoa, I'm asking him if he teaches Qigong. So the next morning I go there, and I'm pulling up, and it's a house with a business attached, and it says Essence of China, Chinese Urban Acupuncture Clinic. It's like, okay, well, interesting. And so I ring the doorbell, and I'm messing around in the yard for a long time. Usually, you want to be in and out. Time is money. The more estimates you do, the more you sell, the more money you make. But I was just piddling around. I was like, man, I hope he comes out. And so I was about to leave, and I rang the doorbell again, and it didn't come out. I was like, oh, man, okay, well, I'm going to call later. And so I get in my car, and I'm backing out, and I see in my rearview mirror him come out the door. And so I pull back in, and I go to talk to him, and he doesn't speak English. And so I was showing him, the estimate, and he called his son, and I talked to him for a minute about the lawn. And then I said, do you teach Qigong? After I hung up with his son, I said, do you teach Qigong? He's like, Qigong, Tai Chi. I was like, okay. I was like, will you teach me Qigong? And he nods his head, Qigong, Tai Chi. And then he calls his daughter. It turns out his daughter was the doctor. His son was young, and his daughter was the doctor. She was the Chinese urban acupuncture doctor. And she calls him, or he calls her rather. And I was like, yeah, I was wanting to know if he could teach me Qigong. And she said, yeah. And so set up a time, and it was just $10 for a private lesson for an hour. just me and him. And sometimes she was there to translate because he didn't speak English very well. He would draw out angles sometimes on the paper because apparently I don't understand what a 45-degree angle is. He's like, writes down a 40, X's it out, makes it a 45, circles it, stuff like that. And, uh, but sometimes she was there to translate, and she, at the first one, she was like, okay, well, what kind of Qigong do you want to learn? I said, well, how about a healing Qigong? And she's like, oh, to heal other people? And I was like, yeah. And she said, well, that takes a really long time and it doesn't work very well. And I said, okay, well then I'll learn whatever he wants to teach me. And I took lessons from him for a while. I don't know how long it was. And then he went to China for a while, came back, and I picked up my lessons again. And so what do I make of that experience? So if I didn't leave the gym, that was my passion, training people. I loved working with clients, and I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I was 20 years old, maybe 21 at this time. When I worked there, I was 21, maybe 22 at that time. It was in 2001. And but I didn't want to work for him anymore. I thought to be successful in the training business, it looks like you couldn't be a very good trainer. It was like most people were more interested in mediocrity. And there's, I think I was a good trainer with good technique and good programming that I couldn't even use there hardly. But there were just some things that I didn't know about. I didn't know about Pavel Tsatsouline and Strong First, and but I do believe I had. I know I had good form, and I had, but it just seemed like I was I was at the most successful gym, and even though I loved all the people, I loved all the clients, I couldn't stand the way it was. And so I would rather not do that. And I would just train people at my house, and I would have like friends and friends of friends come over, and we'd be lifting and doing martial arts out in my garage or out in the yard or something like that. I didn't worry about charging any money for it. It's like, you can come, don't worry about the money. We'll train, we'll have some fun. And a lot of times I had, a pretty good number of people over training, and it was really cool. And I didn't plan on, trying to make a living out of training after that. I would rather do something that I absolutely did not care about for money, and then do my passion for free. And it was then until I discovered Pavel Tsatsouline. And I was like, that was maybe 7 years ago. And I thought, okay, well, if I get back into training professionally, it's only going to be with his certification. It was the Russian Kettlebell Challenge at the time. And so by the time I did it, which was about 3.5 years ago, it became Strong First. And now, I couldn't imagine not doing it. I also have like what I call my job, because I will only do training my own way. Whatever goals the clients have, that's okay. They don't have to be just like me. I'm cool with whatever their goals are. They don't have to be kettlebell dudes, or they don't have to be anything. Just be themselves. I want to help them find their own strength. That's the thing. And so I'll only do it my way. I won't be an employee. So I still do training at least like 4 or 5 days a week. My job, as I call it, I work from like 5 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. And so that leaves me plenty of time to teach my classes and have my one-on-one clients and small groups and that kind of thing. And another thing I was wanting to mention also was I do offer online training. So we can do that through I don't know. Well, people listen to this show all sorts of ways, iTunes, and we have the video on YouTube. So it's the Fitness and Consciousness YouTube channel. Um, Most people listen to it other ways, but there are a growing number of YouTube watchers also. So if you're interested in training with me, send me a message. The email, I gave my PayPal email out earlier for my website, but to make it easy to remember, and if you want to get a hold of me about the show, you can do it at fitnessandconsciousness@gmail.com. So whether you're interested in training with me online, or you just want to give me some feedback about the show, if you want to be a guest on the show, send me a message. You don't have to be famous in the strength world. I've had a lot of big hitters in the strength and martial arts community, and I've had a lot of amazing guests. It blows my mind. It's really humbling to have the people that I've studied so much, and I've read their books and I've studied their methods for years, and then to just have a conversation with them and to learn more about them, for them to be on my show, it's really amazing to me. I appreciate it so much to have this idea that I have work out. I started in February, and my goal from the very beginning was I want to have the best show for fitness and consciousness related subjects in the world, period. And I believe it's happening. And I think I'm getting better at the craft of it. And the guests are amazing. That they really help make the show, of course. When I can have people like Stuart McGill, Fabio Zonin, Steve Maxwell, and Steve Cotter, and these amazing coaches. But I also really don't care how famous a guest is. Sure, it's great to have the big names. I'm not going to pretend it's not. It is. It's huge. But if you have just nothing to promote, if you have, 50 Instagram followers and they're all just your friends and your family or whatever, but if you have an interesting story, if you have something that you want to talk about that you think would be a cool episode, a cool conversation, you have a cool story to tell, send me a message. I've had guests like that. They have nothing to promote. Most of them, they want to promote their book or they want to promote their business in some way. And that's great. That's perfectly fine. But some of them are just like my friends that just have cool stories, and they'll come on and tell them. And so I don't really care how famous you are. If you want to get your story out, send me a message, and we'll see if you're a good fit. I won't take just anybody, of course, but don't feel like you can't compete with the big names. That it's not what it's all about. And so back to I know I've kind of been all over the place. So I keep about to wrap it up here, but the episode being called King of Her Jungle, and with the pirate Don Dirk of Dowdee, he has like all these, his conscience is as black as a bat, and he's doing these like bad things, but he makes the mermaids go splash. If you want to be king of her jungle, if you're a man and you want to be, this woman's man, then the hardest thing, or something that's very hard to do, even Bruce Lee saying the hardest thing is to express yourself honestly. and it doesn't mean being weak. Um, and it doesn't mean being just the tough guy. But it's okay if you have, the flaws. We're all going to have them. And if she has some flaws, which she will, see if you can just deal with it in your mind without bringing it up to her. See if you can just deal with it yourself. And I think that's a huge part of it. But also, don't be afraid to say what you think either. Don't be afraid to be tough, and don't think that. Don't always back down. There's a comedian, Daniel Tosh, and he says a woman doesn't need another, and then he says the P word, which I wouldn't dare say that on the air. So that's, I think, the way to be king of her jungle. And I think I'm going to leave it there. And usually I ask the guest if they have any final thoughts. And I guess that is my final thoughts, other than if you if you can think about your communication and why are there inspirational quotes? These quotes can be so simple. Well, why didn't you think about that? Why do we have to hear that? Why do they get shared so much? These simple inspirational quotes, they work. And we knew those words, so we know the vocabulary, but it can be something simple like Nike, just do it, or something like that. So I will leave it at that. We can just express ourselves as honestly as we can. We're going to fumble over our words. I don't edit the show. And so what you hear is what happened. And like we started out, Jordan Peterson was saying, people think by talking. So I hope you got something out of this show. I hope you found it entertaining. And I don't know how many of them I will do by myself. If I have ideas, maybe I'll start doing some more by myself, keep it more concise, or I don't know. And I'll continue to have these awesome guests. I can't believe how well the show is growing. It's been in 100 countries. It's all over the world. And I really appreciate everyone listening. And that's where I'll leave it. Thanks for tuning in to Fitness and Consciousness.